So, how are you all, and how's it been going this week? The last couple of weeks have been quite odd again, haven't they? I have had to get my sewing machine out and make a mask or two for everybody in our family so that we could practice before we finally went out to the shops. Takes a bit of skill, doesn't it, learning a new normal and getting ready and putting them on. But we've practiced, we've made them, and we're getting the hang of it, I think, just about. But isn't it strange? New normals are hard to get used to, aren't they? And over the last few months, we have had so many changes to adapt to. I don't know about you, but I've found it quite tiring. And here we are in Daniel, learning about a character in the Bible who had to adapt to new normals, didn't he? And if you listened last week to James, you will remember that our lovely Daniel was quite distinctive. He didn't mind doing things a bit differently from those around him. So here's distinctively different Daniel. And we've already seen that he has proven that he wants his loyalty to remain with Yahweh, the God of Israel. He's not interested in climbing the ladder of success in Babylon. He's not interested in the riches and the privilege. He would rather stay true to God. And for that, I think he's already a hero in my eyes. He doesn't mind sticking out like a sore thumb and standing out because of what he believes. So what's happening to Daniel in the reading this week? Well, in a way, like us, he's settling into a new normal. He's getting the hang of this new life in Babylon. He's well and truly there now in the circle of advisors and wise men that are gathered around the king. He's done it differently, he's got there differently, but God has protected him, has shown him that if he sticks with him, he can have life to the full, distinctive, different life to the full. And so here he is, getting used to things. And I guess in a way, what we don't read in the book, because we're only given the highlights of Daniel's story, what we don't see is the day in, day out. We don't see how he's adjusted to the new normal. But we're taking with us into this incident, this story today, the fact that we already know that Daniel has made his fundamental choice in life. In this new way of living in Babylon, God is where his loyalty lies. And so we come into this new dilemma, this new crossroads, knowing that Daniel is going to stay with God. So what's the dilemma this time? Well, it's certainly not about food. This time there is trouble brewing. Big trouble. You see, what's happened is that the king, Nebuchadnezzar, has had a troubling dream. Big deal, you say. I have bad dreams every night. Well, some of us have over the last few months, haven't we? Hasn't it been hard to sleep well? But King Nebuchadnezzar and all the people around him in the ancient Near East knew that a troubling dream meant something bad. It either meant that you had displeased a god somewhere, or it was an omen of something that was just around the corner, and it would be better to know now than to face it without being prepared. And of course, it was a big deal for everybody around the king, not just King Nebuchadnezzar that was troubled. If the king was troubled, everybody was troubled. The king's word was what ruled in that land. He had supreme authority, and if he said jump, the nation jumped. And when he said to his advisors and his wise men around him, I have had a troubling dream, come and tell me what it means, the advisors scrambled. Now these advisors, they look a little bit of a scaredy bunch, don't they, in this story? They're there representing all the types of learning that Babylon cherished and valued. There are politicians, there are historians, there are those who perform magic, there are divinators, there are people who know about the gods in the temple, And all of that collective wisdom is running around the king, wondering what to do. Because the king has said, "Come and tell me what this troubling dream is all about." But he hasn't told them the dream. They ask for time. They ask for a bit more clarity. And who would blame them? Their life's on the line. And the king is getting so fed up. And he issues a death threat. "If nobody can come and tell me about this dream, then that's it. My advisors will have to be put to death." What a crunch. This new normal is quite brutal for Daniel, isn't it? He finds himself in a cutthroat world of politics and power. And although we know his loyalty lies with God, he's already proved that in choosing how he has got himself settled into this new normal. What is he going to do in these circumstances? Perhaps he could hide at the back and pretend he's not quite learnt enough yet. Perhaps he could give his very best advice and hope for the best, hope it's close enough to Nebuchadnezzar's dream to do. But that's not what Daniel does. Just want you to step out of the story for a minute. We'll leave it on this cliffhanger. What will Daniel do? Distinctively different Daniel. And I want us to just explore and think for a minute about what's been happening in the bits that we don't get told. What is Daniel's everyday? Because it's out of that everyday that Daniel's actions will flow. We already know the beginning and the foundation of Daniel's story, as I've said. He wants his loyalty to remain with Yahweh, the God of Israel. So what does that mean for Daniel? I suppose for some people that might simply mean a nationalism, a kind of nostalgia for the culture of Israel. And God, the figurehead, has to be the person that you keep loyal to. It could mean that. It could mean that the rituals, the festivals, the worship that he would have experienced all through his youth at the temple, that was what he clung to. Clinging to that would be loyalty to the God of Israel. But I think what we're seeing in the life of Daniel as we continue to read his story is that actually his loyalty is not that superficial kind of lip service loyalty that you might expect. It goes beyond a ritual understanding. It goes beyond a nationalism. It goes beyond just wanting to keep hold of a cultural heritage and tradition. For Daniel, it becomes evident that he has expectations of this God that he is loyal to. He seems to understand and know something about the God he is trying to stay true to. So what are his expectations of the God of Israel? I mean, I just take my hat off to him. He's in such an unknown and unfamiliar place. When you actually stop and think about it, here is Daniel, young Daniel, distinctively different Daniel, far from home, no longer near the temple where the whole of his worship experience has been centred, all from his youth right till the time when he was taken into exile. He's in a place which doesn't observe the festivals and the traditions and the regular praying that he has been brought up with. He's had all of that stripped away from him. He's even had his name stripped away from him, a name which would have been rooted in the character and relationship Israel had with God. Now he has a Babylonian name that would refer and root him into a Babylonian understanding of life, a worldview that's not his own. He's in unfamiliar territory, there's no doubt about it. And he could have been completely flawed. Because when you think about it, all of his faith experiences, all of his religious ritual, all of his experiences of worship have been tied to things and to places that have been taken away from him. But his expectations of the God of Israel are not stuck there in the places and the things that have been taken away. I'm actually quite taken aback by Daniel. He's not met Jesus, he's not been through Pentecost or heard the story yet of how God is going to send his Spirit to all people who follow him. He's not had that invitation to a personal relationship in the same way that we as Christians have. And yet here is distinctively different Daniel, in a strange, unfamiliar land with nothing about him that could help him to recreate that experience of closeness with God that he would have been used to in his youth. And he sees beyond those things. He sees that God isn't confined within those rituals. He's not confined to only being met with in a temple in Jerusalem. He sees that his God, the God of Israel, is bigger than all of that, greater than all of that, more vital, more alive than any of that. I think it's astounding. Daniel dared to expect that the God of Israel was there with him in Babylon too. And not only that, but that he could worship, he could speak to his God, and that his God was there, eager and ready to speak with him. Daniel is amazing. I know that for me, there have been plenty of moments a bit like a crunch time in my life. Probably the first one was leaving home. All my faith experiences had been based in my family setting until that point. And so leaving home was one of those crunch points for me. Would my loyalty and my decision to be a follower of Jesus find a way of becoming real and lived out outside the experience that I'd already only ever had? Then there was getting married. Could I share that new normal with somebody else? And then we had children, and things began to feel like they were being taken away from my faith thick and fast. There was no longer an opportunity for quiet times. Sometimes it felt like I couldn't even sit through church more than about 1 week a month. There was a new normal that I had to grapple with if I wanted my relationship with God, my friendship with God, to stay real and vital and alive. I had to learn to see beyond. I had to learn that God was bigger than simply only ever meeting me in quiet times. That God could speak to me with Lego surrounding me on a floor. That God could reassure my faith and speak into my doubts and my weariness whilst I was cooking. That God had not left me simply because the rituals and the traditions and the experiences of my faith so far were taken away, and I had to do it differently. There are new normals for all of us at different parts of our lives. And those new normals have a huge impact on our experience of faith, our experience of being in God's presence, our experience of our relationship with God. What about these last few months and the many new normals we have had to face? In a way, it's been another taking away, hasn't it? And a bit like Daniel, we have lost access to our usual place of worship. We have not been able to come to the Lord's table together. We have not been able to come as we usually would into church on a Sunday. And so we've faced another grieving process and another opportunity, I suppose, to look beyond and to see that God is bigger than those places and rituals which we have become used to. Daniel realised something really important. He realised that the places and the rituals and the festivals, all the experiences that had enriched his faith in his youth, were not the faith itself. They were not the end. They were not the point at which only God could be found. They were tools that took him to God and brought him into God's presence, but they were not the end point of his faith. And so Daniel, here in a brand new land, who knew nothing of the God of Israel, still expected great things from God. Still expected that despite the fact that there was no temple, no priestly ministry to rely on, no sacrifice system to rely on, no festivals to celebrate the truths of God, that even then his God was still real, still vital, still alive, still active, and still speaking. And so Daniel, in a similar way to all the other advisors and wise men, knew that he didn't know the answer. But what's distinctively different about Daniel in this story today is that he knows who to turn to find the answer. He knows that the God of Israel, his God, is a God who knows. A God who is not surprised by the ups and downs of human history. A God who is not confined to our own experience, our own worldview. When he comes into God's presence, he seems to be aware of God's universal truth. I am, I was, I am to come. And so Daniel comes to this God that he knows is real. And he expects this God to share with him and reveal to him a God's perspective on what's happening with King Nebuchadnezzar. And God comes and he sees, ready to listen, Daniel. And he speaks. And he shares the dream that Nebuchadnezzar has already dreamed. The statue of many parts. And he shares with Daniel the meaning of this dream. And in a way, the meaning connects with what Daniel has already understood of God. That kingdoms of this world can come and go. They can rise and they can fall. But that God will stand. Over and above any king, any lord, he is sovereign. King Nebuchadnezzar's time may come to an end. The kingdom of Babylon may come to an end. Another kingdom may rise, and that may fall. But through it all, God's sovereignty will stand. And so for Daniel, as we see him in this crunch point, this crossroads moment yet again, we see that yes, he is living differently from those around him. He doesn't run round like a headless chicken worrying about the death threat. He knows who to go to. He turns to God just as he does every day. And he expects his God to be there for him, to be ready to listen and to speak into the situation that his world finds itself in. And I think for me, looking at this story of Daniel adjusting to a new normal, and clinging to God in the midst of it. Not in a helpless, I'm going to fall apart kind of a way, but in a triumphant and victorious kind of a way, because he knows that his God is alive and active in the world. I think it challenges me right now. It challenges me as I step one more step at a time into this new normal that we have to face. With all its worries, with all its uncertainties, with our lack of understanding perhaps about when it will change and what's next, with my grief over what I've lost and what feels like it's been taken away. It challenges me to see beyond what I've become used to and to look for God already there, already active, already speaking to his people. It challenges me to be different like Daniel, to make sure that my choice every day is I'm going to be loyal to my living God. Not just pay lip service to my Christian heritage or my Christian birth and my upbringing, but to be so tied to a living, active God that I am full of hope and full of expectancy that wherever I go, whatever my new normal puts in front of me, I can come to it knowing that God will be there, ready to speak to those of us who are ready to listen.
Who can know the mind of our Creator? And who can speak of wonders yet unseen? Who can reach the height of understanding to play the notes of wisdom's melody? Who has weighed the dust of every mountain? Who has walked the mysteries of the deep? Who has laid the earth on its foundation? And who conducts the waves upon the sea? I stand in awe of you. I stand in awe of you. So glorious and true. I stand in awe. I stand in awe. Who can know the mind of our Creator? Who can speak of wonders yet unseen? Who can reach the height of understanding to play the notes of wisdom's melody? Who has weighed
So now we come to our time to choose. There will be 4 different options on the screen, one of which will take you to the end of the service, to the prayers and the final song. So now it's your time to choose.